America's men feel lost to some degree, or at least like they're being attacked as we take a look at what the Democrat Party went wrong. That's been the theme of the news shows of late. They and the Democrat Party screwed up. I'm John Mike Keene.
Across the board, didn't matter what race they are, males turned towards Donald Trump, turned away from the Democratic Party. And why? That's the real question that should be asked. Why? Because in so many ways, the party basically dismissed him, left him out of the conversation, and not until the very end decided, oh, I better reach out and see if these guys are worth talking to.
That's Montel Williams on the Democrat Party. Yeah, the problem with the Democrat Party is it's been run by feminism for about 40 years. Feminism despises masculinism.
But when you start shoving certain things down people's throats that they don't want to have to eat, you're going to have to deal with the consequences of forcing somebody to do something that they didn't want to do.
By the way, men are not entirely adaptive culturally. That's why, our old men, even myself, our stereotype is when you listen to the new music, that music just sounds like a bunch of noise. It's because we don't like to adapt to culture quickly, especially when culture is wrong and hateful. We're even more resistant. And then you jam it down our throats and then you get a pushback. And that woke up the American male. They looked around for what candidate to vote for, and all they saw was Trump being cool with the men, black men, Latinos, white men. By the way, Trump also isn't anti-women. He had lots of women. You know what? Men, it's a masculine trait for men to love women. Feminism. We love it. We just don't want to be it.
Well, there's the messaging toward men that Trump was doing. And then there was the messaging toward women that the Harris-Biden campaign were doing.
And that's the big difference between the two. They both had their message, and Harris-Biden's message was, first of all, Tim Walz was their big advocate, and maybe even Barack Obama. And these two men are wussies. Real men look at the Barack Obama and Tim Walz, and they see elite, snobby, effeminate. And then you look at what Trump put out. What about Trump women? They attacked our women, Mark Cuban did, and said that they were unintelligent and weak. That didn't fly well. The Trump campaign loves strong women. We love women. So we don't hate women, but the Democrat Party did hate men. And then Trump, of course, loves men. He is a man, loves manly man things. And Kamala Harris, the message clearly was, you hate men. The only thing you love about women is abortion. And that didn't connect to anyone.
I mean, I remember sitting at the Democratic convention and looking after 3 or 4 days and saying, not a whole lot of men on this program. And that's intentional because they thought this was going to be an abortion election. But was that a misstep?
I think that abortion being the top issue was obviously a misstep because we saw that it didn't actually bring out the women that they expected either. But I would argue that from the onset, the polling showed that there were stark divisions between what men valued and what women valued, which isn't actually surprising across this country. But the economy was something that everybody valued.
That's true, that everyone values the economy, but more so about the Democrats' weakness. In identity politics, it's all about your casing, your skin, your gender. It's materialist. So only the material world matters to them. It's not immaterial or philosophical, where our values live, where love lives. It's invisible. You can't measure it with a scale or a litmus test. And so you have these two different philosophies about even how we identify ourselves. The Democrat Party kept doubling down, and the only male external that they like are the ones that are dressing like women and affecting themselves like women. And then Trump was the opposite. He goes, I love men and women on the inside of who they are. Women being real women, authentic, and men being authentic on the inside. I believe that message is more where America's at. A larger majority are not into the gender bending, and they're not into shirking off the holistic blending of the external male with the internal male and the external female to the internal female. That we are more holistic. We are integrated. We're not at war with our own bodies, which is what the Democrats' message was.
Looking at the psychological aspect of things, men have felt left out for quite some time, be it whether it was social groups, be it whether it was, leading to depressive states or other things. They've been very vocal about that. That existed long before the pandemic. I do think that there needed to be stronger outreach to men and men of all backgrounds. But in addition to that, there needed to be more men at the helm of the decision-making process on the campaign.
Well, Kamala could have gotten the right men, but again, they were being informed, if men at all, someone like a Tim Walz, weirdos, or even Barack Obama. What does Barack Obama have in common with real men? Other than he plays some basketball, some hoops. Deep down inside, that's not what some guy who works in a lumber yard acts like, some guy who goes into a coal mine, some farmer, someone who works in a steel mill, someone even in the military.
I'm glad that we have this
to be fair,
circle here
both
because
Trump
it matters.
and Harris's campaign were run by a mixture of men and women. I'm not sure. I think it's just about a theory of the case.
But no,
right?
a lot of the messaging strategies that were developed to men by white women.
White women, the true bad guy. She does not just white women, I'll go farther. Rich, white, elitist women were running the Kamala Harris campaign. And by that, I mean Barack Obama. They're educated, so they were hyper educated, we found out. The women who came were largely white, hyper educated. And then the women who went to Trump, and the men, but the women were married with kids. That is, someone who can maintain a relationship and someone who had reproduced and had also more sensitivity to the economy because she had to feed her family.
I do think we have a crisis of especially young men in this country, and they're in many ways disconnected from the rest of their families, disconnected from their communities, disconnected from our political culture, disconnected from our civil culture. And that's a real problem for a society that depends on all of us to be engaged.
This is why I'm so happy the Democrat Party got kicked in the teeth and are out in the wilderness not knowing what they stand for, because they demolished our young boys. They hated our young boys and made our young boys hate themselves. That's a cultural movement. It's not just a political party. It's Hollywood, it's the university, it's the elite snobs that are anti-male, and the boy students, the male students, suicide is up. That's why they want to change their gender, by the way, and that's the trans issue. More males want to become females than females want to become males, because males are raised that you're despicable, that you're an animal, that you're primitive, that your natural instincts, and they're always being corrected and chided. Don't touch that. You're a racist. You can't talk to women, or you're some kind of a stalker. They're made to feel shame for who they are. And, many of them are buckling under the weight and they feel lost. They go out and work for a living all day, and they're taught it's not very important to drive a truck.
I think the Democrats in this election made men feel like the patriarchy is over, boys, and we're going to put you in the back seat for a while, and you're just going to have to accept it, without any thought to the ramifications of telling people who are out honestly trying to make a living, provide for their families, be good husbands, be good fathers. When you tell people who are doing their level best that either A, it's not good enough, or B, you're part of the problem, what do you expect?
Yes. So in a way, the Democrats, they lost this themselves. They attacked the wrong people. And the only position that they promoted was abortion, which is literally death. Was their number one issue was death.
The attempt to put walls on the ticket, and that was going to somehow solve all of the problems that had been built up for years, was ridiculous, because it turns out Walz was the last person that men wanted to hear from. And
Walz, who is creepy and bizarre, and then he's the one who calls J.D. Vance weird. And then all of the media, of course, followed suit and said, oh, J.D. Vance is weird.
Some of what he and his running mate are saying, well, it's just plain weird.
These guys are just weird. That's who they are.
As weird and creepy as J.D. Vance.
Super weird idea from J.D. Vance.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's quite weird.
They're just plain weird.
Just plain weird.
Just plain weird.
That stuff is weird. They come across weird, and then they start being weird. Yeah, they're weird.
Being a really weird.
He's such a weirdo.
Donald Trump and his weirdo running mate, they're weird. deeply and profoundly weird.
They are weird.
These Republicans just being weird, it's just weird. It's really weird.
Republican weirdness goes.
Well, what men heard is a manly man like J.D. Vance, a Marine who went to college, who came from hillbilly elegy, came from basically the Skid Row, super poverty, and made something of himself all the way up to vice president, that he was somehow evil and wrong. And then Tim Walz, who is this weirdo, they're going, he's the new hero. And Doug Emhoff, this other creepy weirdo, Kamala Harris's husband, who is just, the whole thing is weird the more you look into him. That those guys were the new template? No.
I remember at the beginning of that whole campaign when they put him on, I sat right here and people were like, oh, they got camouflaged hats. They're going to be wearing them in the deer stands this fall. And I think to your point that you just made, that idea that it was not formulated by a bunch of dudes who actually go deer hunting. It was come up with by a bunch of people who've never met a dude that actually goes deer hunting.
The rich white women that came up with the idea for Tim Walz to walk around with a camouflage hat, and the whole time they could not defeat the branding that he wanted to put tampons in the men's bathroom. That branding was bigger and screamed louder.
But when you try to put that kind of window dressing on a real communications problem or a real relationship problem, it gets exposed immediately.
And that came down to trust. Men knew that there was no reason to trust the Democrat Party, that they would be put in dangerous hands and it was going to get worse for us, not just us, but for our families. And it would also get worse for traditional women. You have to remember, feminists aren't just against men. They're against masculinity and they're against traditional forms of femininity. Any woman who had a traditional form of it, maybe she's a homeschool mom, maybe she's married with lots of kids, maybe she actually enjoys cooking and doesn't dream of being a big corporate executive, that those women felt attacked by this administration and they fled to Trump. This is our cultural war. The war is not over. The Democrats lost this battle big, thank God. There's that Bible verse where if you cast out a demon, you got to stay frosty and stay praying, because that demon will go out, find that house to be cleaned, and bring back 7 other demons to come back in and occupy it. The Democrats must be crushed. We must continue to crush them, make sure that they continue to lose. Don't let them up. We're going to continue to register voters in Pennsylvania. I hope to cover Scott Pressler coming up. We're going to expand our win. We're going to make sure that this evil worldview, anti-human worldview, anti-man and woman worldview is crushed and stays down forever. I'm John Mike Keene.